today's video, I tried to replicate different desserts from around the world, making them vegan, improvising along the way as always. But I want to say still that some of these recipes are quite authentic, especially the Australian one, kind of, sort of. I had so much fun with this video. I don't think I've had this much fun with a recipe video since the Percy Jackson one. That's a good one. I don't know, I just love these types of recipes that force me out of my baking comfort zone and make me try things that I would have never been able to come up with by myself. So I hope you'll have fun watching as well. Gonna be a long one, so sit back and relax, and I'm gonna stop rambling and continue rambling, but with the voiceover. After making the coxinhas in part 1 many moons ago, quite a few of you told me to try Brigadeiro, one of the most popular desserts in Brazil. They're these insanely rich chocolate balls coated in sprinkles and served in little muffin liners. One of the few ingredients you're gonna need here is sweetened condensed milk, which isn't exactly the most common vegan product out here, so I had to improvise and make my own. This looks like caramel because it is. I accidentally made caramel the first time I tried this. The Brigadeiros here still turned out delicious, but they were basically chocolate caramel that didn't keep its shape well for very long. So the second time around, I decided to first off use a thicker plant milk, canned coconut milk, but soy cream works really nicely as well. So add that to a big pan along with sugar, salt, and vanilla. Mix and bring it up to a quick boil. Reduce the heat to medium and then let everything simmer for 25 to 30 minutes or until reduced to about half. Make sure you stir every once in a while. Meanwhile, you can chop up some dark chocolate or just use chocolate chips. And grease a large plate with coconut oil. After those 25 to 30 minutes, the color will probably have turned dark again. I used brown sugar here, so that's probably why. Now's the time to add in the chocolate. Mix it in well. Actually keep mixing until you can see the bottom of the pan clearly, and the mixture takes kind of longer to run back together. Now pour this onto the plate that you've already greased and let it cool on the counter first until it's not piping hot anymore, and then put it in the fridge for 1 hour. Meanwhile, get your sprinkles ready. Traditionally, you use these ones here, but you could also just go for colorful ones. Why not? You know, I made coconut brigadeiro anyway, so I thought rolling them in coconut flour could be fun. Measure out about a heaping teaspoon of the chocolate mix and roll it in your hands. Lots of recipes advise you to grease your hands with a bit of butter before you do that, but honestly, dry hands work best for me. Then immediately roll it in your coating of choice. You can also use a spoon or fork to help with that. Obviously, I don't know for sure if I nailed these. They might have still come out a bit soft, but oh my god, these are insanely good. Moving on to this next idea, Welsh Cakes. Welsh Cakes are sort of like a hybrid between pancakes and scones. Because I got a sort of breakfast energy from this idea, I wanted to incorporate oats some way, somehow. So I tried making these with oat flour only first. Yeah. I still ended up eating these crumbles with some soy yogurt. So for the second try, I did part oat flour and all-purpose. Add both to the food processor, along with some nutmeg, cinnamon, and dried ginger. Also add salt, baking powder, and sugar. Then blend until fine and powdery. Measure out your cold, in all caps, vegan butter, and cut that into cubes. Add those cubes to the food processor. Instead of the egg, Frostfire suggests to go for some mashed banana or a flax egg. I did unsweetened applesauce here. Now pulse the food processor again for a few seconds until the butter flakes are distributed nicely but not incorporated fully. It's like making pie crust essentially. Dump the mix onto your surface and bring it together with your hands. If the batter is a bit too wet, add some more flour. If it seems too dry, add a bit of non-dairy milk. Shape the mix into a large disc or thick square and wrap it up in some parchment paper and leave that in the fridge for about an hour. Then roll the dough out on a floured surface until it's about 1 centimeter thick, though you can also make really thin ones, whatever you prefer. Gather the scraps and roll them out again. Here I added some dried currants to a few, which annoyed many of my siblings, but you could also do chocolate chips instead. This step is optional, but feel free to dip the bites into some sugar before frying them in a lightly greased pan for about 4 minutes on either side. The sugar makes for a nice crispy sugary crust, but yeah, feel free to omit it. Cover everything with a lid to help the center cook. So just to recap, I cooked them until golden brown on one side, then carefully flipped the cakes, added the lid, and let them sort of steam through for another 4 minutes or so. And that's it. Definitely serve them warm. Leftover ones you can keep for a couple more days and toast them up. The ones covered in sugar, maybe don't add those to the toaster directly, but rather reheat them with a pan. For idea number 3, I decided to recreate one of Australia's most famous homemade treats, fairy bread, made up of buttered bread and sprinkles. According to a person on Reddit, the trick to doing it right is getting the shittiest, whitest home brand bread you can and slathering on some spread that can barely be called butter, then just pour it on the bread. Whatever sticks is called fairy bread. The it in this case being vegan sprinkles. I wonder if people ever toast their bread, or would that be considered like a cultural crime? But this is not bad. A solid 6 out of 8, I would say. I'd be really interested in trying a version with dark bread, vegan butter, and chocolate chips. If you're missing some extra sweetness in this, here someone suggests to substitute the butter with sweetened condensed milk. I made a much better sweetened condensed milk mix for this next recipe. Like better in terms of more authentically like condensed milk looking compared to the coconut one. The milk mix was part of a vegan Leche cake. This cake is super popular in Central and South America. I've always associated it with Mexico in particular, but lots of countries claim it to be theirs. Venezuela or Nicaragua, for example. Where exactly it originated, I'm not sure. Let me know if you've got some insight on that. I made it for my sister's birthday last week, so it's also elementary school kid approved. Preheat the oven to 180 degrees Celsius and grease a 9 or 8 inch square shaped baking dish. So my cake is going to be a bit smaller than the usual 9 by 13. In a large mixing bowl, combine all the dry ingredients: all-purpose flour, cornstarch, sugar, which like technically counts as a wet ingredient in baking, but that is a discussion for a later time. Baking powder and salt also go in there. Then add all the wet ingredients, except for the aquafaba, straight to the bowl as well. Melted vegan butter, vanilla, apple cider vinegar, and non-dairy milk. Give that a good mix. It's not going to be a super smooth cake batter consistency just yet. In a separate mixing bowl, one with high walls, you're going to whip up the chickpea water using an electric hand mixer until it achieves soft peak consistency. This took around 5 minutes for me. Fold the chickpea mix into the cake batter and then pour everything into the baking dish. Bake it until golden brown. In the meantime, put together the milk syrup. To a large saucepan, add some sugar, vanilla, and 3 different types of milk. I went for soy cream, almond milk, and an oat soy barista blend that we happen to have at home. Bring it to a quick boil and then let it simmer over medium heat for about 25 minutes, whisking every once in a while. Go ahead and poke the baked cake with a fork and then pour over all of the syrup. Let the cake rest and cool off now for at least 30 minutes or even overnight. In the meantime, you can prepare the frosting. Since the syrup makes the cake quite sweet already, I wanted to go for just some simple vegan whipped cream here. You can use coconut cream as well. I have a recipe for that linked down below. Only add the cream once the cake has cooled down fully, otherwise it's just gonna melt away. Also, don't forget to finish this off with some strawberries. And there you go. This next dessert was one of my favorite things as a kid, baklava. I'd always been quite intimidated by the idea of making it myself, but provided you've got access to some phyllo dough, it's actually super straightforward. Again, I couldn't really find a definite answer for who came up with this. I always used to think it's Arabic, but there's actually so many different countries and regions that have their own version of baklava. Apparently, the Turkish and Greek people have been fighting over the dessert's origins since forever. First of all, prepare the nut filling. I'm using a mix of hazelnuts, almonds, and pistachios in this. If they're not already pre-chopped, just chop them all finely. Also set aside a small handful of chopped pistachios for decorations later. In a small saucepan, melt together the vegan butter and olive oil. I don't know, I really like a small hint of olive oil in this, but it's not so much oil that it's gonna taste savory, so no worries there. Grab a medium-sized rectangular baking pan and use it to cut the dough into shape. You don't have to be super precise here. Just make sure that you have like a couple neatly cut sheets that you're going to use for the bottom and top layers. Now on to building the baklava. You're always going to add 2 layers of dough at once. So add those 2 layers to the bottom of the pan. Generously brush that with some of the butter oil mix. And then add another 2 layers. Cover that in oil and repeat until you've incorporated about half the phyllo dough. So once half the dough has been used, you're going to add half of the nutmegs. And then continue with the 2 layers and butter for a few more times. And then add the rest of the nuts. And then continue on with some more phyllo butter layers. I would recommend to cut the baklava pieces first and to then pour over the butter and oil mix. I wasn't thinking here. It's fine either way, but it's just gonna make less of a mess if you cut it into bite-sized pieces first. Make sure you cut through all the way. Your oven should be preheating at this point to 180 degrees Celsius, and then let the baklava bake for 40 to 45 minutes until nice and golden brown. In the meantime, put together the syrup by bringing water, sugar, cinnamon, lemon zest, and lemon juice up to a quick boil and letting it simmer for just a few minutes. Here's where you can go wild with any flavor combinations or spices, like adding some cardamom, cloves, some rose aroma if you like your food tasting like flowers. Pour this mixture over the baked baklava, like immediately once it comes out of the oven. You could also spoon it on top with a big ladle. Let it sit for at least 20 minutes on the counter. And then dig in. Everything will firm up even more once it's been sitting in the fridge for a bit. But yeah, so good. Last but not least, we're making pain au chocolat. I'm so excited about these. I got inspired and motivated to do this by someone named Emily on Instagram who sent me some tips for authentic croissant makings recently, so shout out to her. They're so much easier to make than you think. Most importantly, you make sure that your yeast activates properly and the butter stays cold at all times. To a small saucepan, add some plant milk, some sugar, and vanilla. Have the heat on medium, mix it up and let the sugar dissolve. Then pour this into a separate small bowl and let this mixture cool for a bit. If you want to go in with a thermometer, you can. It's about 40 degrees that you're looking for. Let this sit for about 6 to 10 minutes until nice and frothy. In the meantime, go ahead and combine the flour and salt in a large mixing bowl. Add the yeast mix, combine everything using a spoon until it slowly comes together, and then knead everything with your hands for about 8 to 10 minutes. Add about a half a tablespoon of oil here, that helps with the kneading process. And I know some people say that you don't have to activate dry active yeast because the name active is in the name of the yeast. The amount of times dry yeast wouldn't work for me just because I didn't pay attention to the temperature or feeding it with sugar weren't fun times. So I think it's better to be extra careful. Once it's not sticky anymore and really nice and easy to work with, place it into a lightly greased dish, could also just be the mixing bowl that you just used, and cover it up with a clean dish towel and not with plastic wrap. You'd think I'd have baked enough things in my life to realize this was not very smart. Anyway, while the dough is rising for about an hour, measure out your cold vegan butter. Again, cold in all caps. Cut it in half and then roll out each butter piece sandwiched inside a sheet of parchment paper. It helps to press down the butter first and then to start rolling. You don't even got nobody being honest with you. Breathe till I evaporated. Nobody see it. Place the 2 sheets into the freezer for at least 30 minutes. Once the dough has risen, give it another quick knead and then cut it in half. Roll out the dough until it's just a bit bigger than the butter pieces. Now work in the butter. Fold over the top and bottom, and then fold over the dough and butter twice. Sort of like you fold it over in thirds, if that makes any sense. And then start rolling it out further until you're able to flip it in thirds again. This feel like a quaalude, no sleep in my body, no bitch in my body. Do we get it? Wake up with the sun going down and it's time to start your day, brother. Nice. Now this goes into the fridge while you're repeating this with the other butter sheet and dough. And then it's time to assemble the pastries. Work with 1/2 at a time again. Roll out the first half until it's about 15 times 30 centimeters. Cut it into either 3 or 6 pieces. I went for mini croissants. You could roll 1 piece of chocolate, or for that more traditional pain au chocolat type look, you're going to use 2 sticks of chocolate. Look at those layers! Let the buns sit for another 20 minutes or so in the fridge while you're preheating the oven. I don't think I've given much fun facts about these. Obviously they're French. Again, who came up with them really is a mystery. There's theories of Marie Antoinette being involved and like a baker from Vienna. Interesting stuff. And that is it from me. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I would absolutely love to try breakfast from around the world next. So please leave a comment and tell me what you'd like to see me make there. Gotta give credit to Greco on YouTube for inspiring this series in the first place. And yeah, thank you so much for being here, and until next time, bye!